Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Amonkhet. That's Luis Scott Vargas. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. We're down the stretch here on day one. A few more rounds of standard before we're going to cut. All the players with 4-4 record or better are going to make it into the next day. Down in the feature match area here for round number 6, we've got Patrick Dickmann. He's playing Jund Gods. He plays for Team EUreka. His opponent on the other side of the table from Team Top Level playing Red-White Humans. Do you know who it is just because I said humans? You probably did. It's Craig Wesco. They're ready to go. Let's hit into the feature match area for round number 6. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Amonkhet. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas, and we are ready for round 6 action, where we've got Patrick Dickmann from Team EUreka. He's playing, well, the deck is called Jund Gods, and seems aptly named, taking a quick look at the list here. Other side of the table, Craig Wesco from Team Top Level, and he's on Red-White Humans. He is apt to play variations of humans decks, or we call them white weenie decks, and this is no exception. Can you give us your thoughts on the matchup here, Luis?
Both of these decks are aggressive, though Craig's is much more aggressive. So when you have two aggressive decks battle, which is what's happening here, the less aggressive deck tries to generally play more as a control deck. So Patrick is going to look to try to stabilize the board with slightly larger creatures and win a long game with cards like Glorybringer or Hazoret or Ronas, these cards that are powerful and generate incremental advantages. Craig, on the other hand, is playing one-drops, always watching, cards like Bloodlust Insider. If you have Bloodlust Insider in your deck, you're probably the aggro deck.
He's utilized 3 mana to make 3 creatures here, so you can tell that he is a very low-to-the-ground deck. Town Gossip Monger alongside that Bloodlust Insider and a Thraben Inspector as well. A Long Tusk Cub, though, for Patrick Dickmann, currently holding down the fort, if barely.
And it would be nice for Patrick if he could get in with the Long Tusk Cub, but unfortunately the Town Gossip Monger can block and then flip, and that would go less well. The Incited Rabble would devour the Long Tusk Cub.
Could bluff it. It's early in the day. These players are not going to have a whole lot of information about what each other are playing, especially decks like these, which aren't the main chunk of the metagame coming in. It looks like he's going to go with Voltaic Brawler, which does actually get him some energy here, Luis.
It does mean that Long Tusk Cub could threaten an attack. Craig still can do something like double block with the Gossip Monger and the Thraben Inspector, forcing Patrick to use energy, but then at least trading just 1-for-1 plus the 2 energy. So what it'll depend on is whether Craig thinks he should be on the defensive or the offense here, and because Long Tusk Cub has a trigger when it hits the enemy player, Craig does have incentive to make this block.
Okay. So Patrick going to want to order that Town Gossip Monger first, and then just say, sure. He's going to force the issue here, of course, Craig Wesco, and that's going to prompt Patrick Dickmann to use up those 2 energy and make a trade. So the end result of all of that was a 1-for-1 trade and a couple of energy disappearing there. For Patrick, we'll note here that he has not played his 3rd land. That could become an issue pretty quickly here if Craig can significantly add to the board.
Especially since Patrick has a lot of cards in his deck that cost 3, 4, even 5 mana, whereas Craig is much lower to the ground.
Let's see what Craig has lined up for this turn.
Well, one of the cool combos in Craig's deck that he's not utilizing quite yet, but he could next turn if he wanted to, is Bloodlust Insider plus Handweir Garrison. And playing the Garrison, giving it haste, and immediately attacking and making 2 tokens.
Ooh, that is nice. In the meantime, Craig Wesco is going to play Always Watching, so non-token creatures he controls get +1/+1 in Vigilance. He attacked with both and prompted yet another trade. This time the Bloodlust Insider traded for the Voltaic Brawler. Patrick Dickmann clearly recognizing that his mana issues could prevent him from proceeding much further in the game. Oh, he hits a land here.
And unfortunately for Patrick, a lot of the options when it comes to what he can play here are cards that can't block. Ronus the Indomitable currently can't block. Scrap Heap Scrounger, well, can never block. And that means that even though he would like to try to stabilize, he's not very close to doing that.
So he played a Scrap Heap Scrounger, and then he played a Greenbelt Rampager, I believe, returning it back to his hand and just netted himself an energy for it, just being mana efficient there.
Yeah, might as well pick up a free energy. This is a despite being a Jund Gods deck, is a slight energy aggro based. So.
All right, more mana efficiency on the other side, this time from Wesco, who has that handware garrison that you mentioned a minute ago. Of course, won't have haste this time. Wow, and Patrick Dickman just scoops up his cards. That advantage bar just jumps over. He could not hit his land. He shakes his head and just says, well, I guess I'm dead. 16 life, not enough for him. And that's game one going to Patrick Dickman. What a beating.
Yeah, basically that turn, if Patrick had a way to remove the handware garrison, maybe he would not be in that bad a shape because Thraben Inspector is not the most intimidating attacker. But given that he had nothing, he was going to take a ton of damage the next turn.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that game went to Craig Wesco. I misspoke there. All right, we've got more action, as you can see. I see an Owen Turtenwald down there in the feature match area, plus plenty of others. We'll get to that when we come back after these messages.
Play Standard each weekend to win special Standard Showdown prize boosters. Amonkhet Standard Showdown events run through July 2nd, now available on Saturday and Sundays. Find a location to play at magic.wizards.com/Standard Showdown.
Represent your country at the World Magic Cup at national events. This September, you can compete against your country's best players for the title of national champion. You need Planeswalker points to participate, so keep playing in local events to qualify. Learn about qualifying for nationals at magic.wizards.com/nationals.
I turn it into the, what, like 7-5? And welcome back to the feature match area here in Nashville. We've got more Table 1 action here. Our players are ready to go once again. Patrick Dickmann versus Craig Wescoe. Patrick with the sudden but appropriate scoop there, it seemed. He was not able to add to his board in a meaningful way. And lost game 1.
Yeah. Had he had a play that turn, the game was far from over. If he didn't have a play that turn, well, the game was actually over, or just about. Now, he wasn't taking lethal, but he was going to be way too far behind on board.
And Craig has Thraben Inspector, one of his favorite cards there on turn 1.
Thraben Inspector is a pretty neat one.
That card has savagely overperformed from first glance.
For a while, it crewed Smuggler's Copter, and that was great.
Yeah.
Now it contributes a clue so that Toolcraft Exemplar, gets +2/+1. It also can team up with other things to crew vehicles. It can, take advantage of getting emblems or always watchings. It's definitely a card that has done more than it looked like on first glance.
It licenses disintegrations occasionally. Really great card for just 1 mana. Oh, look at this. Heart of Kirin now from Patrick Dickmann. Maybe he'll be able to take the race to Wesco.
So some pretty neat tricks with Heart of Kirin and Greenbelt Rampager in decks like this. We saw Martin use he actually top-8'd last Pro Tour with Energy Aggro deck, and you can do things like play Greenbelt Rampager, crew Heart of Kirin before the trigger resolves, and then it bounces back to your hand.
Oh, that's cool. Wesco's just going to chip in there for 1. He played a Glorybound Initiate there.
New addition from Amonkhet. Attacks for 4 points of lifelink damage, very effective against other aggro decks, and even hard to block it out of a control deck.
Yeah, and of course we got to see Always Watching in the list there for Craig Wescoe in game 1 as well. Letting you exert at will. See if Patrick can get a little bit more of a quick start this time. He assuming wants to be on the defensive, though his deck looks pretty aggressive, at least at first glance. Just not as aggressive as Craig's.
So kind of one of the things that can happen here is if Patrick ends up being able to be on the aggressive side of things, Craig's going to have a very hard time coming back. However, if Craig's on the aggressive side of things, Patrick does have cards, like similar to the ones he just played, that can help him come back.
Yeah, Radiant Flames out of Dickmann's wipes away both of the creatures, but there's a Thalia Heretic Cathar for Craig Wescoe. See if that can put a wrench in the works for Patrick, who seems to have perhaps sideboarded into a more controlling strategy here.
Oh, 2 tap, guys.
And he just says, well, I got 2 2-drops, go ahead.
What she says, right? Creatures and non-basics I have enter tap.
Yep, all the different creatures and any non-basics. Honor Crop Captain and Athalia's Lieutenant. Wow, this curve is coming together pretty nicely here for Wesco, is it not?
Yeah, he's got now a 4/3 first striker in the form of Thalia, and Honored Crop Captain threatens to pump his whole team and attack next turn for a significant amount of damage. It's games like this where Thalia Heretic Cathar really puts in some work, because it saved Craig 4 points of damage last turn off making it so Patrick couldn't crew Heart of Kirin. And this turn, even if Patrick has like a larger creature, Thalia is going to make it wait an additional turn before it has any impact on the board. Patrick needs to draw multiple removal spells each game to get it to really have a solid chance, and drawing multiple Heart of Kirin, not quite the same thing.
Right. See what he's got lined up here. Voltaic Brawler, he's going to get some energy out of that.
Judge.
Now, he accidentally tapped a swamp.
Mistakenly tapped a swamp instead of a
Just tap correctly.
I just tap correctly. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that is the right thing to do, though, right?
Yeah, I think that not only was it very clearly an honest mistake, he caught it right away, so no real drawback to just saying, like, yeah, just tap your mana.
Mm-hmm.
So that Long Tusk Cub does tend to be a 4/4, which is a solid defender, but Craig's cute creatures are actually bigger than you might expect for humans. Yeah, Thalia's lieutenant and honored crop captain would kind of add up.
Looks like instead of attacking with the scrap heap scrounger, he's going to leave it back on crew duty and pass the turn back to Wesco.
And because Hart has vigilance, Patrick could have also just crewed and attacked, but he really does want to have the option of doing that on defense.
You have one card in hand? Yeah.
Greg's follow-up isn't great. His hand has 3 lands and a second copy of the legendary Thalia. So both players drawing 2 copies of the same legendary, which not really the part of the plan. And both players in a position where any big follow-up spell would be good. Craig has a small advantage here, as indicated, but not being able to play something this turn. Every single turn it matters so much, and each turn it's well within each player's grasp of playing something that can kind of swing the game. So if Craig attacks with Thalia at 4/3 first strike, Patrick can double block and take Thalia down. So,
Craig said combat. He said sure. Go. I think we're right back to even here.
yeah, now it's on who can, draw the first action spell. And
Who does it favor? I would normally think it's Dickman because he has like some gods and some really powerful mid-range stuff. But looking at Craig's deck, he does too. He has some quite a few less inspiring draws, but and always watching, or he's even got a Gideon, something like that could really blow this game wide open.
True. Yep.
Patrick does have a higher density of impactful cards, and the funny thing is, they're not even playing that different of a land count. You'd think that the low to the ground red-white deck would be a lot fewer lands. It actually has more lands. It has 24 versus 21. The difference being that Patrick also has 4 copies of Attune with Either.
Right.
Sure. Okay. Rampager triggers and returns back to hand. So 1 energy.
You can see what Patrick's doing here. This is really cool, Luis. He used up all of his energy on the Long Tusk Cub first. And now he's generating more.
So
He's going to Rampager up to 2.
Yep.
first time,
Yep. So you get 2
Yeah.
counters.
and then I just pay a third time. So
Okay.
Oh. All right, well, he's just going to end up playing it anyway.
He could have been able to end up with another counter on Long Tusk Cub and have the green belt Rampager in hand, but because there's a 1-turn delay thanks to Thalia, where all his creatures enter the battlefield tapped, Patrick would rather just get that 3/4 out and kind of suffer through the 1-turn delay, and just get it into play and not have to worry about it.
Well, it looks like the slightly slower but slightly larger game plan of the creatures here on Patrick's side are inching ahead, as Craig really has kind of hit a wall here as far as action goes.
Each turn that Craig draws a land and Patrick draws a spell, it moves the advantage slightly in Patrick's favor, because at this point, Patrick's board is better and Craig is not really advancing his own.
Okay. And attack.
Well, with nothing better to do, Craig's just going to activate
Trigger.
Needle Spires, send in the team, and say, I want to trigger my Honor Crop Captain.
So Patrick's at 15. He's got a bit of cushion in terms of his life total. He can take a hit here, and it's just not that bad. Then he has to decide basically what he wants to kill. Craig gets tapped out, so Patrick knows there's no shenanigans afoot, and that means that he can do one of his options is he can block the Needle Spires with either Long Tusk Cub or Heart of Kiran and just offer to trade. He can double block Thalia with Heart of Kiran and Voltaic Brawler, and then Thalia first strikes down one of them, and then the other one takes down the Thalia. Or he can block Honored Crop Captain with anything and just offer the trade.
Okay. He's a 4/3.
yeah.
Yes.
It's going to take 5 from first strike.
And then everything's going to trade.
Yes. And once again, you mentioned that the higher and better threat density in Patrick Dickman's list makes that favor him in the long run. Also, he keeps his life total at a nice 10. He does need to draw some stuff, though. He's found a forest.
Patrick also happy to trade off Heart of Kiran when he's just got another copy
Oh, right.
in hand. He also declined to trade off for Wesco's Thalia, and Wesco has another copy of Thalia. So this dance around cards you can only have one of in play at a time is very, very relevant. Similarly, Craig traded off a Needle Spires, and he had another copy in hand. He's not activating both in the same turn, so he was pretty happy about that too. But unfortunately for Craig, this has left him in a position where he's far behind and taking enough damage that Patrick is threatening to end the game pretty quickly here.
Yeah, just 2 power on the board there for Wesco. He is way behind now. He found another copy of Honored Crop Captain, but is it too late?
It likely is. Craig is not in a position where he's going to be doing a whole lot of attacking here. He can get in with Thalia if he wants, but he's facing down a lot more damage coming the other direction.
Do you mean by activating the Needle Spires as well, or?
Likely just by attacking with Thalia, because he kind of has to play Honored Crop Captain this turn.
I see.
Or he could leave Needle Spires back as a blocker. It can block the Long Tusk Cub.
Sure. Well,
Craig
Thalia gets in for 4, knocking Patrick down to 6.
Craig could also go for the extremely unpleasant way of giving Thalia Vigilance, which is to play a second copy of Thalia and choose to keep the untapped one.
Ooh.
At some point, Craig might have to do that.
Your turn.
He decides just to pass the turn back.
So from Craig's perspective, he's passing with Needle Spires back. From Patrick's perspective, he might suspect Craig is something like Avacyn. There's no guarantee that Archangel Avacyn isn't lurking in Craig's deck, and with all this mana untapped, maybe she's just waiting to flash in and block. Unfortunately for Craig, no such miracles are going to happen. He's got a Needle Spires. He can trade that off for Long Tusk Cub, but he still takes a bunch of damage.
Yeah, and he's had to effectively give up his turn worth of mana to do that when he's already behind. Things are not looking good for Craig Wesco here in the second game. He won the first game pretty convincingly, and it was fast, but he is now pretty significantly behind in this one.
Crew hard.
Yep.
Attack.
Well, Dickman content to just keep hitting in the air.
Pass.
Crew the Heart of Kirin, attack you. Go.
Not too bad for Craig. He basically, as far as how the turn could have played out, that was among the best. Because that Long Tusk Cub could be a 5/5 and beat Needle Spires in a fight. But Patrick, unwilling to see what exactly Craig left all that mana up for, is going to take the safer route and attack in the air.
There's an Honor Crop Captain and nothing else from Wesco. Interestingly, he has left up 5 mana again. Now, this wasn't really his choice. He didn't have anything else to do, but I wonder if Dickman's going to think anything now, you know?
Well,
Because
the way Craig's deck is built, he can't really afford to leave 5 up every turn.
yeah.
And if he had Archangel Avacyn, certainly she would have come down to block the
He
Heart
would
of
have
Kirin.
known that for sure, right? So it's just about the Needle Spires now.
At this point, I think if you're Patrick, you can make a pretty high confidence assumption that Needle Spires is what Craig left mana up for, and that's pretty easy to determine what you want to do against. There's not as much hidden information as last turn. There's still some. You don't know if Craig has cards like Magma Spray in his deck. You know, it's not super likely, but you can't guarantee it. And getting into a fight on the ground might be something that he doesn't want to risk.
Yep. Okay. I'm at 5.
Scrounger.
Another Scrounger and pass it back. And as you can see, Patrick has built up a huge advantage here. And he can really punish Craig for having left up this mana turn after turn. Now, Craig didn't really have much of a choice in the matter, but falling behind that far means that Patrick can just build his advantage turn after turn and then eventually just overwhelm Craig Wesco with an attack with everything or enough for lethal. We'll see what happens here from Wesco's standpoint. The more mana he taps, the more confident that Patrick can be about just moving in with an alpha strike for the victory.
And notice Patrick's on 5 lands and the rest are spells. Wesco's on 9 lands because there's one in his graveyard as well. And given that Wesco's deck is lower curve, that's not good news for Wesco.
Dickman is down to 6, so he's being very careful with his life total. Let's go with plenty of blockers here. He has access to Needle Spires plus the 3 creatures. Interestingly, he cannot sacrifice his clue and activate Needle Spires,
So
which could be a factor.
if Patrick attacks with everything, Craig does not die because Patrick has to use one of the Scrap Heap Scroungers or one of his other creatures to crew the Heart of Kiran, and Craig has 4 ground blockers. But that does advantage Patrick a fair amount just because his creatures are so much bigger. The problem is he doesn't know what Wesco's got in hand, and he again is still worried about some removal spell or some sort of play happening.
It also does seem unlikely that Dickman takes lethal damage if he leaves back this many creatures. Craig's going to be falling down to 1 here, though, as he takes 4 in the air. Really needed to find something with that. And I think he ended up with an Always Watching, but plenty of blockers for Dickman, right?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for Craig to get damage through, and especially with Scrap Heap Scrounger coming back end of turn, I don't see how Craig can get enough of Patrick's creatures off the board that he can't accrue Heart of Kiran and attack next turn.
Looks like he actually has 2 copies of Always Watching in his hand. But like you said, it's that Heart of Kiran flying over that's the real problem. He may be able to force even multiple chump blocks here, but it won't matter as long as Dickman can keep one of those, say, Scrap Heap Scroungers alive.
And if other creatures are dying, Scrap Heap Scrounger has fuel with which to come back. So
Yep.
it's gonna be difficult to kind of like thread the needle there.
Dickman trying to even things up here in the match. He lost a quick one to Wesco, but he's got him down to just 1 life.
Always watching.
How can you watch more than always?
Well, if you're a token, you apparently can't.
True. Oh, he's not even going to do it anyway. He's going to activate Needle Spires and
Okay, I'm up. Yeah.
move in.
Trigger.
He's just going to make sure that Patrick blocks correctly, doesn't forget something, accidentally take a bunch of damage. Maybe he messes something up. If he doesn't, then we'll probably see Wesco just say go and then scoop up his permanents
So is
the next turn.
it only Azza or him or everyone?
But unfortunately for Patrick, this is still a complicated enough attack that he's got to put some thought into it and make sure
Yeah.
he doesn't put like Heart of Kiran on any of the creatures actually except the Thraben Inspector. The Thraben Inspector is not quite big enough to kill Heart of Kiran. All the rest of them are, though.
Yeah, only 3 power on that Inspector right now.
Block, 4 damage. Put a counter on him and pay energy.
Little shortcut there from Patrick. Normally he wouldn't have priority there.
Or
But he's assuming Craig is tapped out. Technically, Craig has Needle Spires, but
True.
I think Patrick's assuming that's just not going to happen.
Right. And as it turns out, he is correct.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
he does.
he
is
should die
first
yet.
strike, yeah. Okay. And then
Yeah. The Needle Spires has 3 power. It got blocked by
regular
3.
damage.
All
My
right.
2
4
guys
power,
die.
excuse
Mhm.
me. So it first strikes down.
3, so it's 1, 2.
The
3, so
Rampager.
he lives and he lives.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'll dual shot.
Craig with the dual shot technology.
Craig playing cards not in his hand. And now all that's left is for Patrick to get in that car and ride.
Activate. And attack.
Alright, you got me.
All right. You got me, he says. And that's game 2 going to Patrick Dickman with Jund God. So he does seem to have changed around his
Possible to go to the bathroom, or is it possible to
configuration.
go to the bathroom?
You can go to the bathroom. Yeah, you can go right now.
Well, it looks like we might be hanging out for a minute here, Luis. It looks like Patrick may need a little break, and apparently they're the only ones still going.
That the energy aggro deck against the red-white humans aggro deck.
Looks like Tsuyoshi Fujita won his game with red-white exert, defeating Frank Lepore. He was playing a blue-white engulf the shores.
Yeah,
In this case, it was blue-white engulf the Lepores.
Well, the Lepores got engulfed apparently as the exert aggro deck just kind of outraced it. I do like this deck though. It has Approach of the Second Sun as its win condition.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, mono blue, engulf the shore, bounce all creatures. You have Torrential Gearhook to flash it back. Bounces your Gearhook back. You just get to keep casting all these sweet instants. And
I kind of thought just casting Torrential Gearhook was pretty sweet, but it looks like I wasn't going deep enough here. Looks like the blue-white flash deck of Federico Basso also defeated Corey Burkhart, who was playing blue-red control. Both of the players were 3-2 coming in. Perhaps a bad matchup for the blue-red deck. Hard to say.
It's a little tough because they both decks have a fair amount of counter magic, but the flash deck has cheaper cards to get under it and then just use counters to back them up. Traditionally, decks like that are good against control decks.
Take a look at our feature match area here. We've got a little bit of a wide shot for you to take a look. It's in the middle of the play area here. It's pretty cool. It's kind of the center stage. And, oh, look at that. Wouldn't you like to have your name on that?
Yeah, it would be awesome.
Twice. Obviously, Luis does have his name on that from back in 2008.
Sadly, so does Gabriel Nassif.
You were close.
At my expense, yes.
Yeah. Take a look at our matches still remaining. You can see that many of them are finished at this point, but still plenty going. Is that Paulo right there?
Yes, Apollo Vitor Domodorosa.
Yeah, hard at work in the office.
It's not that hard at work. He's playing Etherworks Marvel, which
you kind of do it or you don't.
You just kind of spin the wheel. You see what comes out. Like, you won a prize. It was a really big prize.
Yeah, 10-10.
I do think that there are some really cool builds of Marvel out there. I've seen some members of the Pantheon playing Sultai Marvel. So you get Demon of Dark Schemes is one of the cards featured. You get some pretty cool cards to just get off of Marvel and just really get in there.
I like that. Players, of course, just finishing up, getting shuffled. You can take a look at them here. They are, by the way, both 3-2. These players, so they're already kind of in the really got to put together a run mode. I mean, they've got wiggle room. We also had Owen Turtenwald in the feature match area playing Mardu Vehicles. He was playing against Andrea Mengucci, also on Mardu Vehicles, and Owen improved to 5-1 with a quick victory over Mengucci.
Well, as given by, or evidenced by the metagame breakdown, Mardu Vehicles has not gone anywhere.
Not going anywhere.
We'll see how it does during day one. We'll see what the metagame breakdown looks like on day two, because that's a more true test of where decks stand. But the day one metagame breakdown had almost a quarter of the field playing Mardu Vehicles. It was like slightly less than a quarter.
How much of that do you think are people who maybe don't have access to a full testing team, you know, like you would if you were playing in the event, and
Owen Turtenwald is on one of the best testing teams and also playing Mardu Vehicles.
There you go. So maybe it is just still the best deck rather than the default deck.
Well, it can be both, which is actually an interesting spot to be. It can be the kind of deck that someone will play who's like, well, I don't have a big testing team. I'm going to play some matches on Magic Online. I'm going to see what decks do well. Or you have someone like Owen Turtle who tested for 2 weeks in a house and still came out with Mardu Vehicles.
Right. Okay, Game 3 just about to get underway. Craig Wesco will be on the play, which is, well, if you've ever played an aggressive deck, it's a really big deal for these decks. Take a look at Patrick's hand. What do you see here, Luis? Is that a keeper?
That hand looks good.
Yeah,
It's
2 lands.
It is, unfortunately, a little slow on the draw because without a card like Radiant Flames, if Craig goes 1-drop into 2-drop into 3-drop, or worse yet, 1-drop into double 1-drop into Always Watching, a hand that starts on turn 2 is going to be behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of draws from Dickman are just going to be behind. All right, well, no one drop here. It's going to be Needle Spires instead. That's going to be at least a sigh of relief there from Patrick, who's going to play his game trail tapped.
Not a very big game.
No. All right, what's the 2-drop? Well, Selfless Spirit. So Craig Wesco already has insurance plan for a potential future Radiant Flames. Oh, not a bad draw, though, for Dickman. I think he found maybe a Fatal Push off the top of his library.
Well, that is the kind of card he needs. He wants to be able to double spell on the same turn, be able to play like next turn, play a 2-drop and a Fatal Push, and that'll kind of get him back into the driver's seat here. Because otherwise, presumably Craig is just going to have more efficient and more plays. Though Craig's draw is not particularly impressive. A 2-1 on turn 2 and no play on turn 1 is not how humans generally wants to start their game.
Let's see what he has for turn 3, because he has some pretty explosive stuff available to him. First things first, though, he's going to attack with his Selfless Spirit.
It's German, but it doesn't have
Yeah,
reach.
it gets +1/+1 trample when you use 1
Yes,
energy.
yes.
1 energy, +1/+1 trample.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he said it's in German, but no, it doesn't have reach.
18?
And Selfless Spirit flies safely over to knock him down to 18, and he does have a 3-drop, and it is one of his better ones as well. Handwear Garrison, a card I haven't seen in a while, but this thing can create a board presence all its own. Ooh, land off the top, though, for Patrick. Can he have one of those turns that you were talking about, Luis, where he maybe Fatal Pushes something and also keeps on developing his board? We'll see.
Unfortunate part for Patrick is that he doesn't look like he has got a way to kill the Handwear Garrison, and that's going to make things tricky because that card does rack up an advantage fairly quickly.
Well, he does have a Long Tusk Cub, which he can use to at least force the issue. Maybe he can combine either one of the humans dying or forcing a removal spell from Wesco with that Fatal Push. You can see Patrick has it safely at the front of his hand there.
Once Fatal Push is on, Patrick still has to get rid of that Selfless Spirit, unfortunately. But he's got paths that he can go down that do that. It's just they're not readily available.
Uh-oh, is this always watching from Wesco?
That's what it looks like.
Kaboom!
Combat step.
Okay.
So Holes Watching makes the Garrison a 3/4, which still isn't big enough to make the double block bad for Patrick. Patrick can just put both of his creatures on and take out the Garrison, or take out Selfless Spirit if that's what Craig prefers to sacrifice.
Yeah.
But that's still not too bad for Patrick.
In the interest of mana efficiency and the fact that he's going to have to get rid of that Selfless Spirit at some point, he's just going to fire off the Fatal Push now. It does leave the Garrison down that he will need to find an answer for at some point, though right now his board is the answer for it.
Creatures with power and toughness can actually block, which is not something happens all the time in Standard, but certainly happening right now.
Yeah, just threatening the block. I kind of like it. Look at this. Patrick's lining up an attack.
What I also like is that Patrick has a Sky Sovereign console flagship in hand, and he's just waiting on the opportunity to play. He needs to draw a 5th land, but if he does, that card is pretty good.
How about Bristling Hydra? You were talking about power and toughness. Well, here's some more.
Yeah, Bristling Hydra is large.
He's going to get the energy pre-combat. That's going to bump him up to 5. And if he'd like to attack with the Long Tusk Cub, he will have the ability to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Look at this.
All right. That is
Who's
aggressive.
the aggressor? Yeah, and one of the interesting things about this is he's kind of punishing Craig for the always watching. It buffs all the creatures you have, but he killed one, and now the always watching certainly doesn't attack or block, so he's just getting in.
14, 6 energy.
Wow, he just hit him for 6.
And 2 energy, thanks to the Long Tusk Cub. So
Right. Looks like this one's starting to favor Patrick Dickmann as he is just going bigger. than Craig Wescoe.
And Wesco, again, he has 3 lands in his hand. He's got a Declaration in Stone, but that can't even take out the Bristling Hydra, thanks to Hexproof. And taking out Long Tusk Cub or Voltaic Brawler is just not the end of the world.
Yeah, these last 2 games, the draws for Wesco have been pretty subpar. I mean, what does he want? 3 lands, 4 tops? And he had
Yeah, I think
9 last time?
4 lands are fine for him, and he's sitting on something like 7 lands this time.
Yeah, you know, he's playing the Needle Spires for both mana fixing and kind of flood protection, but they can only do so much.
Yep.
Yeah, it is your turn, Patrick. Craig Wesco cannot be happy to just send the turn back, no attacks after having just taken 6 damage.
No, Craig does have a Needle Spires kind of lurking in the background there, but that's not gonna. It's not gonna keep Patrick from developing his board, certainly. And even if Patrick doesn't make an attack, if he just plays 2 things this turn or plays 1 large thing this turn, that is quite bad for Craig.
Yeah, this one may have slipped away from Craig. This could be him going down to 3 and 3.
Another brawler. Trigger.
Yep.
Another Voltaic Brawler. He's going to get some more energy. Curious to see what Patrick does here. He has 8 energy right now.
And I think if Patrick doesn't force Craig to trade off the Needle Spires, there's a possibility that we see Handweir the Writhing Township.
Really?
Because he's got a Handweir Garrison in play and a Handweir Battlements in hand. It's a 7/4 Trample Haste, and whenever it attacks, put 2/3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature tokens onto the battlefield, tapped and attacked. I assume the judges have the Eldrazi horror tokens.
Yeah, they got them all taped together already. All right.
3 cards.
I mean, I kind of want to see it.
Activate.
Okay.
Move to blocks.
Well, Craig can also block the Brawler here with Needle Spires. It's a 3/2 double strike.
Two mana up for Patrick Dickmann, and Craig just says, well, I'm falling behind way too quickly. I'm just going to block here and see what happens, though.
Oh, Craig giving up on the Handweir the Writhing Township plan.
Yeah, but this is... let's see, so what happens if Dickmann moves all in and just uses 6 of his energy here?
Well, Dickmann is
5/5.
going to either use 4 and make it a 4/4, so it just trades with the 3/2 double strike, or none and just let the Long Tusk Cub die. But
He can't save his creature.
yeah, I imagine he's more inclined to use 4.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. So he'll get to maintain some energy and still make the trade. I don't know how happy he is about that, but
4/4.
there we go.
1 energy back. It's a 5/4.
Oh, what else does he have?
+2/+2 and extra.
Oh, he's got a Blossoming Defense.
He's got
in hand.
Blossoming Defense. Okay, well that changes things.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So it's now a 7/7, which survives the 3/2 double strike.
Wow.
2 double strike.
All right.
Can you take 4?
At 10.
And that was another
He just really wants to
swing
I really do.
Sorry.
in Patrick Dickmann's direction.
Always use that card,
Okay, okay.
no matter what.
Sorry, I'm going to play a Game Trail. And pass.
1 card.
1 card.
So even though Craig has Declaration in Stone, he can get rid of the 2 Brawlers. He can pick up them both, or Hydra or Long Tusk Cub, because Patrick is empty on energy. But Craig's still not in a position where he's really getting to himself a point where he can win this game. He's able to at best, slow the bleeding without actually advancing his board all that much. Glory Bound Initiate, great on attacking, not so great when you're already behind.
Craig's in the tank here, playing very deliberately. He's found himself Glory Bound Initiate, and he still has that Declaration in Stone that you were just talking about a minute ago. Is there any way out for him, though? It just feels like he's just being crushed by these much larger creatures. And, interestingly, Patrick's creatures are just kind of all good on their own.
That's one of the features of the energy deck is even though there's energy synergies, these cards are all fine by themselves.
Alright, your Specular Stonestones.
Okay, well, stage one here for Wesco to try to make a comeback is to get rid of as many creatures as possible. And that means Declaration and Stone on the 2 Voltaic Brawlers. What else do you do, though? Let's find out. Well, play the Glory Bound Initiate and play a land and pass the turn back. Now, he's not dead on board. He's got blockers.
But I believe that a Sky Sovereign console flagship,
Does that seal the deal?
well, it can kill the Glory Bound Initiate. The Henry Garrison's still a 3/4.
Right.
And currently,
Boom.
Craig is getting attacked by enough creatures that he's obliged to block one. Funnily enough, it's thanks to the Ether Hub that Patrick drew this turn.
Funny. Yeah, he can't activate the Hydra, but the Long Tusk Cub.
So he's a 5/5. Yeah.
Oh, you got problems here, Craig Wesco. That Sky Sovereign really set him back. And now his best play here
Pay 2 energy and make this a 6/6
is to
damage.
trade off with the Bristling Hydra, leaving himself with no board outside of an Always Watching, and facing down a lethal Long Tusk Cub as well as a potentially lethal Sky Sovereign.
The whole game I was trying to.
Do that.
We missed out on seeing
We did.
the writhing Garrison, but
Patrick Dickmann says, that's pretty cool, but I'm glad you didn't get to, because it means that he wins the match and improves to 4-2. Like I said, Craig Wesco is going to have to start his tournament off 3-3 this time. He's got a couple more rounds to go. He's going to need to win one of those to come back and play day 2 on the booster draft, at least.
yeah, Patrick has, as a result, locked up his day 2 appearance, though I'm sure he would much rather get into day 2 at 6-2 than something worse.
For sure. A lot of good tools in that deck, in the Jund Gods deck. Looks like a pretty cool one. Curious to see how it ends up slotting into the metagame. We'll keep an eye on it as we move our way through day 1 and, of course, into day 2. That's going to do it for round 6 here. We'll be back with more Magic, though, after these messages.
here at the end of round 6. We're closing in on the last couple of rounds of Standard. So, who has perfect records? Mark Tobiash of Team EUreka, who I presume has to be on some kind of Team Etherworks deck, because that's generally what he does. So he's 6-0. Chris Fennell, 6-0, part of Team Lingering Souls. Now, Pierre Daniel, who made his second Pro Tour top 8 just a couple of PTs ago at Kaladesh, he's back in prime position. The Frenchman, a runner-up from Pro Tour Theros, of course, behind Jeremy Desani, his teammate in 2013. He is 6-0, and so is Oliver Ox, the Australian champion of Grand Prix Brisbane, being around for the best part of 20 years. Had him on the stream earlier on. He is 6-0 as well. Plenty of big names at 5-1. Chris Calcano, former Magic Online World Champion Magnus Lanto, Martin Muller, one of the Danes, Sam Pardy's 5-1, Brad Nelson, Hall of Famer Gabriel Nassif is there, and also Hall of Famer Eric Froelich. But it's Deck Tech time here once again over at the news desk, and we've got a real fan favourite, one of the great streamers in the game. You may have seen him at lunchtime on the Enter the Battlefield segment. It's time for a Deck Tech with Paul Cheon.